Millionaire suddenly develops Alzheimer's disease, and then a secret is revealed. Harold Worthington stared at the locket in his trembling hands, his weathered fingers tracing the intricate engravings on its golden surface. Inside lay a faded photograph of a woman whose name danced just beyond the reach of his memory. He knew she was important, perhaps the most important person in his life, but why couldn't he remember her name? Sarah, he whispered, the name suddenly materializing in his mind like a shaft of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Sarah, my love, where have you gone? At 80 years old, Harold Worthington was a man who had it all, or so the world believed. His name graced the facade skyscrapers, his face had adorned the covers of business magazines, and his bank account boasted more zeros than most people would see in a lifetime. Yet as he sat in his cavernous Manhattan penthouse, surrounded by priceless art and exquisite furnishings, Harold felt utterly and completely alone. The great floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he had once conquered, but now it all seemed foreign to him. Street names he should have known by heart were as unfamiliar as distant planets. Landmarks he had helped build were nothing more than nameless structures of glass and steel. Even the faces of the people bustling far below, once potential clients or competitors, now blurred into an indistinguishable mass. Harold's empire, built over decades of shrewd decisions and relentless ambition, was crumbling not in the real world, but in the fragile landscape of his mind. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent his life accumulating wealth and power, only to find himself unable to hold on to the memories that gave that life meaning. A soft knock at the door startled him from his reverie. "Mr. Worthington," a gentle voice called. "It's time for your medication." Harold sighed, carefully placing the locket back into the drawer of his mahogany desk. He couldn't remember when he had started needing reminders for such simple tasks, but he knew it hadn't always been this way. There was a time when he could juggle complex business deals in his head, recall the name of every employee in his company, and still remember to pick up flowers for Sarah on their anniversary. Sarah, there was that name again. He could picture her face now, kind eyes, a warm smile, laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. But the details were slipping away like water through his fingers. As he made his way to the door, Harold caught a glimpse of himself in a gilded mirror. The face that stared back at him was a stranger's, lined with age, eyes clouded with confusion and a hint of fear. This wasn't the Harold Worthington who had built an empire from nothing, who had been feared and respected in boardrooms across the country. This was who was this? He opened the door to find a young woman waiting patiently, a small pill cup in her hand. Her name escaped him as it did every day, but her smile was kind. She reminded him of someone, but he couldn't quite place who. "Good morning, Mr. Worthington," she said cheerfully. "How are you feeling today?" Harold managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, thank you," he lied, taking the pills from her. "Just fine." As he swallowed the medication that was supposed to slow the erosion of his mind, Harold Worthington, once the titan of industry, now stood at the precipice of a battle he feared he could not win. His fortune couldn't buy back his memories, his influence couldn't command his thoughts to stay put, and all the power he had accumulated over his lifetime was useless against the relentless march of time and disease. Little did he know, the journey that lay ahead would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth, family, and the true meaning of legacy. Harold sat in the sterile examination room, the harsh fluorescent lights accentuating every line on his face. Dr. Patel's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "I'm sorry, Mr. Worthington, but the tests confirm our suspicions that you have early-stage Alzheimer's disease." The diagnosis, though expected, hit Harold like a physical blow. He'd faced countless challenges in his life, outmaneuvered competitors, weathered economic storms, but this was an enemy he couldn't see, couldn't fight with his usual weapons of wit and wealth. As Dr. Patel detailed treatment options and lifestyle changes, Harold's mind drifted to the past. He remembered the day he'd opened his first hardware store, the smell of sawdust and metal shavings in the air, the weight of responsibility on his young shoulders. Sarah had been there, her smile bright and encouraging, even as worry lines creased her forehead. "We'll make it work, Harry," she'd said, squeezing his hand. "You watch, this is just the beginning." She'd been right. That single store had grown into a chain, then a corporation. Worthington Industries expanded beyond hardware, venturing into real estate, technology, and finance. Harold had a knack for spotting opportunities, for turning struggling businesses into gold mines. And each success fueled his ambition, driving him to reach higher, push further. "Mr. Worthington," Dr. Patel's voice snapped Harold back to the present. "Do you have any questions?" Harold shook his head, feeling suddenly old and very, very tired. "No, doctor, thank you." As he left the clinic, Harold's phone buzzed insistently. A text from his eldest son, James. "Dad, we need to talk. It's a family meeting at your place tonight. No excuses?" Harold sighed. He'd been avoiding his children's calls for weeks, but he knew he couldn't put this off any longer. The thought of facing them, of admitting his weakness, made his stomach churn. That evening, the Worthington children gathered in Harold's penthouse. James, the firstborn, paced the room like a caged lion, his designer suit a sharp contrast to the worry etched on his face. At 55, he was the spitting image of Harold in his prime, ambitious, driven, and utterly focused on the bottom line. Elizabeth, Harold's only daughter, sat perched on the edge of an antique chair, her fingers flying over a smartphone, even as she tried to engage in the conversation. At 50, she was a successful surgeon, her schedule always packed, her time always in demand. Michael, the youngest at 45, lounged on the sofa, a glass of Harold's expensive scotch in hand. Unlike his siblings, Michael had never shown much interest in the family business, preferring to live off his trust fund and pursue various artistic endeavors. "Well, Dad," James broke the tense silence. "What did the doctor say?" Harold took a deep breath, steeling himself. "It's Alzheimer's," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Early stages, but progressing." The reaction was immediate. Elizabeth gasped, her phone forgotten. Michael sat up straight, the color draining from his face. James's expression hardened, his mind already racing ahead to the implications. "What does this mean for the company?" James asked, earning a glare from Elizabeth. "James, is that really your first concern?" she snapped. "Someone has to think about it," James retorted. "Dad, we need to start planning. Power of attorney, management transition." "I'm not dead yet," Harold interrupted, a flash of his old fire returning. "I'm still perfectly capable of running my company." Michael snorted. "Sure, Dad. Is that why you forgot my birthday last month? Or why you've been missing board meetings?" Harold flinched. He hadn't realized his lapses had been so noticeable. Elizabeth, ever the peacemaker, stepped in. "What matters now is making sure Dad gets the care he needs. We should look into home health aides, maybe some cognitive therapies." "I don't need a babysitter," Harold protested. "Dad, be reasonable," James said. "You can't manage everything on your own anymore. We need to protect the family legacy." The word legacy hung in the air, loaded with unspoken expectations and long-simmering tensions. Harold looked at his children, really looked at them, and wondered when they had become strangers. When had their conversations shifted from family dinners and vacation plans to stock options and estate planning? "Your mother would be disappointed in us," Harold said softly, more to himself than to his children. The mention of Sarah silenced the room. Her absence, even after all these years, was a tangible thing, a void that none of them had ever quite managed to fill. "Dad," Elizabeth said gently, moving to sit beside him, "we just want what's best for you. Let us help." Harold wanted to argue, to assert his independence, but the fight had gone out of him. He nodded, suddenly feeling every one of his 80 years. "All right," he conceded, "we'll try it your way, but I won't be pushed aside. This is still my life, my company." James nodded, already pulling out his tablet. "I'll start making arrangements. We'll need to inform the board, of course, and start looking into care options." As James rattled off action items and Elizabeth chimed in with medical advice, Harold tuned them out. His gaze drifted to the window, to the city lights twinkling like stars. Somewhere out there was the young man who had arrived in New York with nothing but dreams and determination. Somewhere in the fog of his mind were the memories of a life lived large, of triumphs and failures, of love found and lost. Harold Worthington had built an empire from nothing once before. Now, facing the greatest challenge of his life, he silently vowed to do it again, to rebuild his world, one fading memory at a time. So sharp buzz at the intercom jolted Harold from his uneasy slumber. He blinked, disoriented, as sunlight streamed through the half-drawn curtains of his study. Had he fallen asleep at his desk again? "Mr. Worthington," the doorman's voice crackled through the speaker, "your new caretaker is here. Shall I send her up?" Harold frowned, a vague memory of a family discussion surfacing. Had he agreed to this? He couldn't recall, but then again, there was so much he couldn't recall these days. "Very well," he grumbled, pressing the intercom button. "Send her up." As he waited, Harold attempted to make himself presentable, smoothing down his rumpled shirt and running a hand through his thinning silver hair. He was a Worthington, after all. Appearances mattered. The elevator chimed, and Harold steeled himself. He'd fired the last 3 nurses his children had hired. Too patronizing, too inefficient, too there. He didn't need a caretaker, didn't want one. He was Harold Worthington, for God's sake. He'd built an empire with his bare hands. He didn't need some stranger treating him like a child. The knock at the door was soft but confident. Harold opened it, ready with a dismissive remark, but the words died on his lips. Standing before him was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. For a moment, just a fleeting second, Harold thought he saw a flash of Sarah in her face. "Good morning, Mr. Worthington," she said, her voice melodious and kind. "I'm Eliza Thornton, your new assistant." Harold blinked, thrown off balance. "Assistant," he echoed. Eliza's smile widened. "That's right. I'm here to help you with whatever you need, scheduling, correspondence, household management. Think of me as your personal secretary." Harold's eyes narrowed suspiciously. This was new. His children had always insisted on nurses, on medical professionals. This girl looked more like she belonged in a corporate office than a sick room. "Did my son put you up to this?" he demanded. "Actually, it was your daughter's idea," Eliza replied smoothly. "Dr. Worthington thought you might appreciate a more professional approach to your daily needs." Harold harumphed, but stepped aside to let her in. He had to admit it was a clever move on Elizabeth's part. It appealed to his business sensibilities rather than his infirmities. Eliza entered the penthouse, her eyes widening slightly at the opulent surroundings. But to her credit, she quickly composed herself, maintaining a professional demeanor. "Shall we discuss your schedule for the day, Mr. Worthington?" she asked, pulling out a sleek tablet. Harold waved a hand dismissively. "I know my own schedule," he said, even as he struggled to remember if he had any appointments that day. Eliza nodded, unfazed. "Of course, sir. I've taken the liberty of reviewing your calendar. You have a conference call with the Tokyo office at 11 a.m., and your son James has requested a meeting to discuss Q3 projections this afternoon." Harold blinked, impressed despite himself. The Tokyo call had completely slipped his mind, and he'd been avoiding James's requests for a meeting for weeks. "I see," he said gruffly. "Well, I suppose you can stay, for now." Over the next few days, Harold found himself reluctantly adapting to Eliza's presence. She was efficient without being overbearing, helpful without being patronizing. She seemed to have an uncanny knack for anticipating his needs, appearing with a glass of water just as his throat felt dry, or gently reminding him of a name or date that had slipped his mind. But old habits die hard, and Harold's suspicion lingered. One morning, as Eliza was organizing his desk, he caught her looking at a framed photo of Sarah. "Snooping, are we?" he snapped. Eliza started, nearly dropping the frame. "I'm sorry, Mr. Worthington," she said, carefully setting the photo down. "I didn't mean to pry. It's just she looks so happy. You both do." Harold's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. He picked up the photo, a familiar ache settling in his chest. It was from their 30th anniversary, Sarah's face radiant as she laughed at some long-forgotten joke. "Yes," he said softly, "we were." Eliza was quiet for a moment, then said gently, "Would you like to tell me about her?" Harold looked up, surprised. In all the years since Sarah's passing, his children had rarely asked about their mother. It was as if they feared the memories would be too painful for him. Or perhaps, he realized with a pang, it was too painful for them. "Her name was Sarah," he began hesitantly. She was everything to me." And just like that, the floodgates opened. Harold found himself talking about Sarah, sharing stories he hadn't thought about in years. How they met at a charity gala, her witty remarks cutting through his carefully cultivated business persona. Their whirlwind courtship, the small wedding that raised eyebrows in their social circle. The lean early years of their marriage, Sarah's unwavering faith in him as he built his business from the ground up. Eliza listened attentively, asking questions here and there, her genuine interest evident. For the first time in years, Harold felt the fog in his mind clearing, the memories of Sarah coming into sharp focus. As the weeks passed, Harold found himself looking forward to Eliza's arrival each morning. She brought a warmth to the penthouse that had been missing for far too long. Under her care, he felt more like himself, more engaged with the world around him. But there were still moments of frustration, of fear, days when names and faces slipped away, when the simplest tasks became Herculean efforts. On those days, Harold retreated to his study, shame and anger warring within him. It was on one such day that Eliza made a discovery that would change everything. Harold had been particularly agitated, snapping at her and refusing to eat. As she tidied his desk, trying to give him space, her hand brushed against a hidden drawer. Curious, she opened it, gasping softly at what she found. The drawer was filled with sketches and half-finished paintings, all bearing Harold's signature. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces, a hidden talent she'd never suspected. "Mr. Worthington," she called softly, "I didn't know you were an artist." Harold looked up, his irritation fading to surprise, then embarrassment. I used to paint," he admitted. "A long time ago, before all this." He gestured vaguely at his head. Eliza's mind raced. She'd read studies about the therapeutic benefits of art for Alzheimer's patients. Could this be the key to helping Harold reconnect with his memories, his sense of self? "Would you like to paint something now?" she asked gently. Harold hesitated, fear and longing warring in his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. As Eliza set up an easel and laid out paints, neither of them realized that they were about to embark on a journey that would unlock not just Harold's memories, but long-buried secrets that would shake the Worthington family to its core. The easel stood in the corner of Harold's study, a blank canvas perched upon it like a challenge. Eliza had set out an array of paints and brushes on a small table nearby, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of the room. Harold approached slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he picked up a brush. "I'm not sure I remember how," he admitted, a hint of vulnerability in his voice that Eliza had never heard before. "That's okay," she said gently. "Why don't you just start with a color you like? There's no right or wrong way to do this." Harold nodded, dipping his brush into a rich blue. As he made the first stroke across the canvas, something seemed to shift in the air. His hand steadied, his posture straightened, and a look of intense concentration settled over his features. Eliza watched in amazement as the painting took shape. What started as abstract swirls of color began to coalesce into a landscape, a serene lake surrounded by towering pines, a small cabin nestled on the shore. The details were impressionistic, but the scene was unmistakable. "It's beautiful," Eliza breathed when Harold finally set down his brush. "Is it a real place?" Harold stared at the painting, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "Yes," he said softly. "It's where Sarah and I spent our honeymoon. I haven't thought about that place in years." So as the days passed, painting became a daily ritual for Harold. Each canvas seemed to unlock another memory, another piece of his past that had been obscured by the fog of his condition. Eliza would sit with him as he painted, listening as he shared stories prompted by each image. There was the bustling street scene of New York in the 1960s, when Harold had first arrived in the city with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. "I slept on park benches for the first week," he chuckled. "Didn't want to spend a dime of my savings on a hotel room. I was so determined to make it." Another painting captured a cozy kitchen, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. "Sarah's favorite room in our first house," Harold explained, his voice soft with nostalgia. "She'd bake bread every Sunday, fill the whole house with the smell. Said it made any place feel like home." As Harold painted, Eliza noticed other changes. He seemed more alert, more engaged. He struggled less with names and dates, and his mood swings became less frequent. It was as if the act of creating, of connecting with his memories through art, was strengthening the neural pathways in his brain. One afternoon, as Harold was putting the finishing touches on a portrait of a young woman with laughing eyes, Eliza couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "Is that Sarah?" she asked. Harold nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "On our first date, and went to Coney Island, rode the cyclone. She screamed the whole way, then immediately wanted to go again." Eliza leaned in, studying the painting. There was something familiar about Sarah's face, something she couldn't quite place. "She was beautiful," she said. She was, Harold agreed, but it wasn't just her looks. Sarah had this light about her. She could walk into a room and immediately make everyone feel at ease. Had a way of seeing the best in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. As he spoke, Harold's hand moved to his chest, fingers brushing against something under his shirt. With a start, Eliza realized it was the locket she'd seen him with on her first day. "Mr. Worthington," she said hesitantly, "may I ask about the locket?" Harold looked down, seeming almost surprised to find his hand there. Slowly, he pulled the locket out, letting it rest in his palm. "Sarah gave this to me on our 25th anniversary, he said. Said it was to remind me that I'd always have her heart, no matter where life took us." With trembling fingers, he opened the locket. Inside was a small photograph of Sarah, her smile radiant even in the faded image. Eliza leaned in for a closer look, and suddenly the sense of familiarity that had been nagging at her crystallized into shocking clarity. She knew that face, not from the paintings or the stories, but from somewhere else, somewhere in her own past. Eliza's mind raced. Could it be possible? The timing would be right, but surely she would have known, would have been told. "Mr. Worthington," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I think Sarah might have been my grandmother." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Harold stared at her, confusion and disbelief warring in his eyes. "This impossible," he said flatly. "Sarah and I never had grandchildren. Elizabeth chose not to have children, and neither James nor Michael have kids." Eliza took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I was adopted," she explained. "I never knew my birth parents, but I have a photograph of my birth grandmother. She looks just like Sarah." Harold shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "No, you're mistaken, or lying. What is this, some kind of trick? Did my children put you up to this?" "No," Isa protested. "I swear, I had no idea until just now. I would never lie to you, Mr. Worthington." But Harold was already retreating, the walls slamming back up. "I think you should leave," he said coldly. "I don't need your help today." Eliza opened her mouth to argue, then thought better of it. She'd dropped a bombshell he needed time to process. "Of course," she said softly. "I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Worthington." As she gathered her things and headed for the elevator, Eliza's mind was in turmoil. And if she was right, if Sarah really was her grandmother, what did that mean? For her, for Harold, for the Worthington family? And more importantly, how could she prove it? The next few days were tense. Harold was distant, alternating between cold politeness and outright ignoring Eliza's presence. He refused to paint, spending long hours shut away in his study. Eliza was at a loss. She'd considered resigning, giving Harold space, but something kept her coming back each day. A sense of duty, yes, but also a growing conviction that she needed to uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for Harold too. It was on the third day of this uneasy silence that Eliza made another discovery. As she was straightening up the study, she noticed a small key had fallen behind Harold's desk. Retrieving it, she realized it matched the ornate lock on an old roll-top desk in the corner of the room. She hesitated, knowing she was potentially overstepping, but the need to understand, to find some proof of her suspicions, overrode her caution. The desk creaked as she opened it, the smell of old paper and ink wafting out. Inside she found stacks of letters, all in Sarah's handwriting. As Eliza began to read, her hands shaking, the full story unfolded before her. Sarah had indeed had a child before marrying Harold, a daughter she had given up for adoption. Her letters spoke of her grief, her guilt, her fear of losing Harold if he ever found out. They also spoke of her for her secret grandchild, a love she could never openly acknowledge. Eliza was so engrossed in the letters that she didn't hear the study door open. It wasn't until she heard Harold's sharp intake of breath that she realized she'd been caught. "What are you doing?" Harold demanded, his voice quavering with anger and something else, fear. Eliza stood, the letters clutched to her chest. "Mr. Worthington, I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't have, but you need to read these, please." For a moment, she thought he might throw her out then and there. But something in her expression must have reached him, because he slowly held out his hand for the letters. As Harold read, Eliza watched the emotions play across his face: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally a deep, profound sadness. When he finally looked up, his eyes were brimming with unshed tears. "She never told me," he said, his voice barely audible. "All those years and she never." So Eliza approached him cautiously, laying a gentle hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you." Harold looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. "You have her eyes," he said softly. "How did I not see it before?" The revelation seemed to break something open in both of them. As the sun set over the New York skyline, Harold and Eliza sat together, poring over the letters, piecing together the story of Sarah's secrets. They laughed, they cried, they marveled at the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. As night fell, Harold picked up his paintbrush once again. This time the canvas came to life with a family portrait, Harold and Sarah in the center, surrounded by their children, and there off to the side but unmistakably part of the group was Eliza. "Welcome to the family," Harold said as he put the final touches on the painting. "Your grandmother would have been so happy to know you." Eliza smiled through her tears, a sense of belonging washing over her that she'd never felt before. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, telling the rest of the Worthington family, navigating this new relationship with Harold, continuing to help him with his condition. But for now, in this moment, she felt like she'd finally found her place in the world. As for Harold, as he looked at the painting of his newly expanded family, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The fog in his mind seemed to lift a little more, the memories of Sarah and their life together coming into sharper focus. He knew his battle with Alzheimer's was far from over, but for the first time in a long time he felt hope. Together, Harold and Eliza had uncovered a past long buried, and in doing so, had opened the door to a future neither of them could have imagined. The Worthington Industries boardroom buzzed with tension. James Worthington stood at the head of the table, his perfectly tailored suit a stark contrast to the worry lines etched on his face. He glanced at his watch for the third time in as many minutes, his impatience palpable. "Where is he?" James muttered, more to himself than to the assembled board members. As if on cue, the double doors swung open, and Harold Worthington strode in, Eliza close behind. The old man's step had a confidence that had been missing for months, his eyes clear and focused. "Gentlemen, ladies, I apologize for the delay," Harold said, taking his seat at the head of the table, smoothly displacing James. "Shall we begin?" James blinked, thrown off balance by his father's sudden assertiveness. He'd grown used to running these meetings in Harold's stead, gently guiding his father through the motions. This was unexpected. "Of course, Dad," James said, recovering quickly. "As I was about to explain to the board, our Q3 projections are concerning. The new product line isn't performing as well as we'd hoped, and we're facing increased competition in the Asian." Harold nodded, his eyes scanning the report in front of him. "I see. And what do you propose we do about it, James?" James launched into his prepared speech, outlining a series of cost-cutting measures and potential layoffs. As he spoke, he couldn't help but notice the way his father leaned in to confer with Eliza, the young woman whispering something in Harold's ear. "Which is why I believe we need to consider selling off our tech division," James concluded. "It's been underperforming for years, and the capital could be better invested elsewhere." A murmur ran through the room. The tech division had been Harold's pet project for the past decade, his bid to keep Worthington Industries relevant in the digital age. Harold was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of him. Then, to James's shock, he began to chuckle. "Sell the tech division? Oh, James, you never did have much vision, did you?" James felt his face grow hot. "Dad, the numbers don't lie. We're hemorrhaging money." "The numbers tell the story you want to hear," Harold interrupted. "Eliza, would you mind pulling up the file we prepared?" As Eliza connected her tablet to the room's projection system, James felt a surge of anger. Who was this girl to have such influence over his father? And since when did Harold prepare his own reports? The screen filled with graphs and charts, data that James had never seen before. Harold stood, his voice strong as he began to speak. "What my son fails to understand is that our tech division isn't just about immediate profit. It's about positioning ourselves for the future. Yes, we've had some setbacks, but we're on the cusp of a breakthrough." For the next hour, Harold laid out a vision of Worthington Industries that left the board members buzzing with excitement. He spoke of AI integrations, sustainable energy solutions, and partnerships with cutting-edge startups. It was bold, it was risky, and it was utterly compelling. As the meeting adjourned, James watched in disbelief as the board members crowded around his father, shaking his hand and congratulating him on his insight. Harold stood tall, energized, looking more like his old self than he had in years. James caught up with his father in the hallway. "Dad, can we talk for a moment? In private?" Harold nodded, following James into an empty office. As soon as the door closed, James rounded on him. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "We agreed on a strategy. You can't just come in and upend everything on a whim." Harold's eyes hardened. "I founded this company, James. I built it from nothing. I don't need your permission to make decisions." "Gonna been out of the loop for months," James exploded. "You can barely remember what day it is most of the time, and now suddenly you're Steve Jobs? This is reckless, Dad. You're going to run this company into the ground." A flicker of hurt passed across Harold's face, quickly replaced by anger. "I'm not as far gone as you'd like to believe, son. My mind may not be what it once was, but I still know this business better than anyone, including you. James took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "Look, Dad, I'm just trying to protect your legacy." "Our legacy? These plans of yours, they're too risky. We can't gamble the company's future on some pipe dreams." "Pipe dreams?" Harold scoffed. "That's what they said when I expanded into real estate. When I bought our first tech startup, every great achievement in this company's history started as a pipe dream, James. You've forgotten that." The two men stared at each other, the weight of unspoken resentments and fears hanging between them. Finally, James spoke, his voice low and controlled. "I'm calling for a vote of the board to remove you as CEO." Harold's eyes widened in disbelief. You wouldn't dare. I don't have a choice, Dad. You're not well. You need to step back. Let those of us who can think clearly take charge. Before Harold could respond, a soft knock at the door interrupted them. Elizabeth poked her head in, her expression concerned. Is everything okay? I could hear you two from down the hall. James ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Everything's fine, Liz. Just a little disagreement about business strategy. Elizabeth stepped into the room, her gaze moving between her father and brother. It sounded like more than that. Dad, are you all right? You look pale. Harold waved off her concern. I'm fine, Elizabeth. Your brother just doesn't appreciate being challenged. That's not fair, James protested. Elizabeth, you have to see that Dad's not thinking clearly. These plans of his, they're going to destroy everything we've worked for. Elizabeth frowned. What plans? Dad, what's going on? As Harold began to explain, Elizabeth's frown deepened. She'd been so focused on her own career, her own life, that she'd missed the growing tensions within the family business. Now, watching her father and brother face off, she felt a pang of guilt. Maybe we should all take a step back, she suggested. Dad, when was the last time you had a checkup? It might be good to consult with Dr. Patel before making any big decisions. Harold's face clouded. I don't need a doctor to tell me how to run my company. I'm fine, Elizabeth. Better than I've been in years, in fact. Oz of Eliza? Elizabeth asked, a note of skepticism in her voice. Dad, we don't know anything about this girl. How can you trust her with so much responsibility? Eliza has been a godsend, Harold said firmly. She's helped me reconnect with myself, with my memories. She's family. James and Elizabeth exchanged a look. Family, James repeated. Dad, what are you talking about? Harold hesitated, realizing he'd said too much. He hadn't intended to reveal Eliza's connection to them just yet, not until he'd had a chance to process it fully himself. It's complicated, he said finally, but I trust her, more than I trust either of you right now, it seems. The hurt on his children's faces was palpable, but Harold stood his ground. He was tired of being treated like an invalid, tired of having his every decision questioned. And I think we're done here, he said, moving towards the door. James, if you want to call for a vote, go ahead. But remember, I still hold the majority of shares in this company. You might not like the outcome. As Harold left, James and Elizabeth stood in stunned silence. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. James, what are we going to do? I've never seen Dad like this. James's jaw clenched. We do what we have to protect the company and to protect Dad from himself. I'll call Michael, get him on board. We need to present a united front. Elizabeth nodded slowly, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something that would change their family forever. Across town in his painthouse, Harold sat at his easel, brush in hand, but instead of the peaceful landscapes or family portraits he'd been painting recently, the canvas was a swirl of dark, angry colors. As he painted, he muttered to himself, fragments of the argument with James replaying in his mind. Eliza watched from the doorway, her heart heavy. She'd never meant to come between Harold and his children, never meant to cause such turmoil. But as she looked at the man who was her newly discovered grandfather, she knew she couldn't abandon him now. Whatever storm was coming, they would weather it together. As the sun set over New York City, casting long shadows across the Worthington Industries Tower, the stage was set for a battle that would test the bonds of family, the limits of loyalty, and the true meaning of legacy. The soft morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harold's penthouse, casting a warm glow on the paintings that adorned the walls. Eliza moved from room to room, carefully dusting each frame, her mind still reeling from the events of the past few weeks. The revelation of her connection to the Worthington family, the growing tension between Harold and his children, it all felt like a dream sometimes. As she entered Harold's study, she paused, frowning. Something felt off. Her eyes scanned the room, trying to pinpoint what was different. Then it hit her. The large abstract piece that usually hung above Harold's desk was missing. "Mr. Worthington," she called out, trying to keep the alarm out of her voice, "did you move the painting from your study?" Harold appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "What painting?" Eliza pointed to the empty space on the wall, the blue and gold abstract. "It's gone." Harold's frown deepened as he approached the wall, running his hand over the faded patch where the painting had hung. I can't remember moving it," he said, a hint of frustration in his voice. Eliza's heart sank. Was this another manifestation of Harold's condition? Had he moved the painting and forgotten? But as she looked around the room, she realized with growing alarm that it wasn't just one painting missing. The small landscape by the window, the portrait near the bookshelf, they were gone too. "Mr. Worthington," she said carefully, "I think we need to check the rest of the apartment." A thorough search revealed a disturbing truth. 7 paintings were missing, all valuable pieces from Harold's personal collection. As they stood in the living room, surrounded by empty spaces on the walls, Harold's face was a mask of confusion and anger. "We need to call the police," Eliza said, reaching for her phone. Harold's hand on her arm stopped her. "No," he said firmly. "No police. Not yet." "But Mr. Worthington, these paintings are worth millions. Someone has clearly broken in and—" "And what?" Harold interrupted. "Managed to bypass the most sophisticated security system money can buy. Walked out with 7 large paintings without anyone noticing." He shook his head. "No, this is an inside job, and I intend to find out who's responsible." Eliza bit her lip, uncertain. "Should we at least inform your children? They might be able to help." A shadow passed over Harold's face. "My children," he muttered. "Yes, perhaps we should." Within an hour, James, Elizabeth, and Michael had assembled in the penthouse. As Eliza explained the situation, she watched their reactions carefully. James paced the room, his face a storm of emotions. Elizabeth sat perfectly still, her doctor's calm firmly in place. And Michael lounged on the sofa, an almost bored expression on his face. "This is ridiculous," James exploded once Eliza had finished. "Dad, we need to call the police immediately. These paintings are insured for millions." "No police," Harold said firmly. "Not until we know more." Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Dad, I know you're upset, but involving the authorities is the sensible thing to do." Unless she hesitated, glancing at Eliza. "Unless you think you might have moved them yourself and forgotten." The room fell silent. Eliza could see the hurt in Harold's eyes at the implication. "I may be old, Elizabeth," he said coldly, "and yes, my memory isn't what it used to be, but I think I'd remember moving 7 large paintings." Michael spoke up for the first time, his tone casual. "Maybe you sold them, Dad. You know, to fund your big tech plans for the company." James's head snapped around. What tech plans? As Michael filled James and Elizabeth in on Harold's presentation to the board, Eliza watched the tension in the room ratchet up another notch. James's face grew redder by the second, while Elizabeth's calm facade began to crack. "So let me get this straight," James said, his voice dangerously low. "You're making massive changes to the company without consulting us, and now millions of dollars worth of art has conveniently gone missing?" He turned to Eliza, eyes narrowing. "And where do you fit into all this? Suddenly your dad's right hand, privy to company secrets." Eliza felt her cheeks flush. "I'm just here to help Mr. Worthington. I had nothing to do with." "Oh, it's Mr. Worthington now, is it?" James sneered. "What happened to all that family talk, Dad? Or was that just another thing you forgot?" "That's enough, James," Harold snapped. "Eliza is not on trial here. None of us are. What we need to focus on is finding those paintings." Elizabeth stood, ever the peacemaker. "Okay, let's all calm down. We need to approach this logically. Dad, when was the last time you definitely remember seeing the paintings?" Harold frowned, concentrating. "I am not sure. Last week." "No, maybe." He trailed off, frustration evident on his face. Great, James muttered. So they could have been gone for weeks and we're only just noticing now. Michael stretched, standing up. Well, this has been fun, but I have a gallery opening to get to. Let me know if the paintings turn up, yeah. As Michael sauntered out, Eliza couldn't help but notice the flash of hurt in Harold's eyes. She also didn't miss the way James's gaze followed his younger brother, a look of suspicion crossing his face. Once Michael was gone, James turned back to Harold. Dad, you have to see how this looks. The company, the missing paintings, something isn't right here. I think maybe it's time we considered getting you some more comprehensive care. Harold's face hardened. What I need, James, is for my children to trust me, to support me. Instead, you're all circling like vultures, waiting for me to fail. That's not fair, Dad, Elizabeth protested. We're worried about you, about the company, about our family. You're you, Harold challenged. Or are you worried about your inheritance? The words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Eliza watched as something seemed to break between Harold and his children, a chasm opening that she wasn't sure could be bridged. As James and Elizabeth left, their faces a mix of hurt and anger, Eliza turned to Harold. What do we do now? She asked softly. Harold's shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to drain out of him. Now, my dear, he said, his voice tired, we find those paintings. And in doing so, I fear we may uncover some truths about this family that none of us are ready to face. As the sun began to set over the New York skyline, casting long shadows across the empty spaces on the penthouse walls, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something much bigger than missing artwork. The Worthington family's carefully constructed facade was cracking, and what lay beneath might change everything. The soft glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows across Harold's study as Eliza pored over old photo albums. The missing paintings weighed heavily on her mind, but tonight she was on a different mission. Harold had finally fallen into a fitful sleep, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the remnants of a family history she was only beginning to understand. As she turned the pages, faces both familiar and strange looked back at her. Harold in his younger days, sharp-eyed and ambitious. The children growing up, their smiles becoming more reserved with each passing year. And Sarah, whose face Eliza now saw echoed in her own reflection. A yellowed envelope slipped from between two pages, falling softly to the carpet. Eliza picked it up, her heart racing as she recognized Sarah's elegant handwriting. The letter was addressed to my dearest granddaughter. With trembling hands, Eliza unfolded the paper and began to read. My darling girl, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally come to light. I only hope that I'm there to see it, to hold you and tell you how much I've loved you from afar all these years. But if fate has other plans, know that you have always been in my heart. Your mother, my Elizabeth, was so young when she had you. Too young, we all thought, to raise a child. The decision to give you up for adoption was the hardest of my life, but we truly believed it was best for you. I've spent every day since wondering if we made the right choice. I've watched you grow from a distance, my heart swelling with pride at every milestone. Your first steps, your high school graduation, your college degree. I was there for all of it, a silent observer in the life I wished I could have been part of. There's so much I want to tell you. So many secrets that have weighed on me, but the most important thing is this: you are loved. You are a Worthington in blood if not in name, and you have a strength in you that comes from generations of survivors and dreamers. I don't know what the future holds, or how this truth will change your life, but I hope, with all my heart, that you'll find a way to forgive us for the past and embrace the family that has always been yours. With all my love, your grandmother, Sarah. Eliza's vision blurred as tears fell onto the letter. All this time she had been right here, under their noses. Sarah had known her, had watched over her. The realization was overwhelming. Lost in thought, she didn't hear the study door open. It wasn't until Harold spoke that she realized she wasn't alone. I see you found it, he said softly. Eliza jumped, hastily wiping her eyes. Mr. Worthington, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to pry. I was just looking for. Harold held up a hand, silencing her. It's all right, Eliza. I think it's time we talked. He lowered himself into his favorite armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 80 years. I've known Hugh from the moment you walked through that door, he said. Or at least a part of me did. The part that still remembers everything. Eliza stared at him, stunned. But how? I didn't even know myself until recently. Harold smiled sadly. Sarah told me years ago, on her deathbed, it was her final confession, her last request. To find you, to bring you into the family. But by then my mind was already starting to slip. I forgot. Until I saw you and something just clicked. Why didn't you say anything? Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I was afraid, Harold admitted. Afraid of disrupting your life, afraid of what it would do to the family. And selfishly, I was afraid of losing you. I thought if you knew the truth, you might leave. Eliza moved to kneel beside Harold's chair, taking his weathered hand in hers. I wouldn't have left, she said fiercely. I would never leave. Harold's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You're so much like her, you know, Sarah. She had that same fire, that same kindness. I see her in you every day. For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of decades of secrets settling around them. Then Eliza spoke, her voice firm. And we need to tell the others. Harold's grip on her hand tightened. No, he said sharply. Not yet. There's too much at stake. The company, the missing paintings, we need to sort all that out first. But they're my family too, Eliza protested. Don't they have a right to know? Harold's expression darkened. You saw how they reacted to you before. James already suspects you're after the company. If they find out you're Sarah's granddaughter, that you have a claim to the Worthington fortune, no, it's too risky. Eliza felt a knot forming in her stomach. She hadn't even considered the implications for the family fortune. I don't want money, she said. I just want belonging. A family. Harold's face softened. I know, my dear, and you have that with me. But the others, they may not see it that way. Not with everything else that's going on. Eliza nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at her. Keeping this secret felt wrong, like a betrayal of the very family she longed to be part of. But she couldn't deny the logic in Harold's words. What do we do now? She asked. Harold's eyes took on a determined gleam. We find those paintings. We secure the company. And then, when the time is right, we'll tell them everything. Together. As Eliza agreed, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one leaked secret, and everything could come crashing down around them. But as she looked at Harold, at the grandfather she never knew she had, she felt a surge of resolve. Whatever came next, they would face it as a family. A strange, broken, beautiful family, but a family nonetheless. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Eliza carefully folded Sarah's letter and tucked it into her pocket. It was a talisman now, a reminder of where she came from and the love that had watched over her all these years. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls and painful revelations. But for the first time in her life, Eliza felt like she truly belonged somewhere. And she would fight with everything she had to protect that sense of belonging, no matter the cost. The Worthington Industries Tower loomed against the New York skyline, its glass facade reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. Inside the top-floor executive suite, James Worthington sat alone, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and a half-empty bottle of scotch stood on the desk before him. As he poured another drink, his hand trembled slightly. The events of the past few weeks weighed heavily on his mind. His father's erratic behavior, the missing paintings, and now this. He glanced at the computer screen where rows of numbers told a damning story. A soft knock at the door startled him. "Come in," he called, quickly minimizing the spreadsheet on his screen. Elizabeth entered, her doctor's coat draped over one arm. "James, what are you still doing here?" "It's past 9. James forced a smile. "Just catching up on some work. What brings you here so late?" Elizabeth's brow furrowed with concern. "I was worried about you. You've seemed off lately. Is everything okay?" For a moment, James considered telling her everything. The weight of his secrets felt crushing, and Elizabeth had always been his confidant. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he said, "I'm fine, Liz. Just stressed about Dad and this whole mess with the paintings." Elizabeth nodded sympathetically. "I know, it's been hard on all of us. Have you heard anything new about the investigation?" James shook his head. "Nothing concrete, but I have a bad feeling about all of this. Something's not right, Liz, with Dad, with the company. I can't put my finger on it, but..." Penny was interrupted by the chirping of Elizabeth's phone. She glanced at it and sighed. "It's the hospital. I have to take this. We'll talk more later, okay?" As Elizabeth left, closing the door behind her, James slumped in his chair. He reopened the spreadsheet, staring at the numbers that spelled out his guilt. Years of embezzlement hidden in plain sight. Small amounts at first, easily justifiable as consulting fees or miscellaneous expenses. But over time, it had grown. 100,000 here, 1,000,000 there. Now the total sum was staggering. James had always told himself it was for the good of the company. He was the one keeping Worthington Industries afloat, while his father's mind deteriorated. He deserved compensation for that, didn't he? But deep down he knew the truth. He'd gotten in over his head, made bad investments, lived beyond his means, and now, with his father suddenly taking an interest in the company finances again, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. The ping of an incoming email jolted James from his brooding. His heart raced as he saw the sender, Internal Audit Department. With shaking hands, he opened the message. "Mr. Worthington, during our routine quarterly audit, we've noticed some discrepancies in the financial records that require immediate attention. We've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss these findings in detail. Regards, Sarah Chen, Head of Internal Audit." James felt the blood drain from his face. This was it, the beginning of the end. Unless... not. His eyes fell on the bottle of scotch. An idea began to form, desperate and dangerous. If he could just buy some time, maybe he could fix this, cover his tracks, reap money somehow. To do that, he needed a distraction, something big enough to overshadow any financial irregularities. The missing paintings, of course, if he could find them, be the hero who recovered millions in stolen art. Surely that would throw the auditors off the scent. At least long enough for him to figure out a way out of this mess. But where were the paintings? As the night wore on, James ransacked his father's office, searched every storage facility owned by the company, even considered the possibility that Michael might have hidden them as some sort of misguided prank. It was nearly dawn when James, exhausted and desperate, returned to his own office. As he sank into his chair, his gaze fell on an old photo on his desk. It was of him and his father, taken years ago at the opening of a new Worthington building. Harold stood proud, his arm around a much younger James. In the background, barely visible, was a familiar painting. James's eyes widened as realization struck, the secure vault in the basement of the Worthington family home. A place so obvious, so close to home, that no one had thought to look there. Within an hour, James was standing in front of the massive steel door, his father's old security code fresh in his mind. The lock clicked open, and James stepped inside, his heart pounding. There, leaning against the far wall, were the missing paintings, all 7 of them, untouched and undamaged. James let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. This was it, his salvation. But, as he reached for the first canvas, a voice behind him made him freeze. "I had a feeling I'd find you here." James whirled around to see his father standing in the doorway, Eliza close behind him. Harold's face was a mask of disappointment and anger. "Dad," James stammered, "I can explain. I was just..." "Just what, James?" Harold interrupted. "Just stealing the paintings you already stole once. Or were you planning to find them and play the hero?" James felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. How did you know?" Harold's eyes were cold. "I may be old, James, and my memory might not be what it was. But I'm not a fool. I've known about the embezzlement for months. I was just waiting to see how far you'd go." James's mind raced. "The audit, you set that up?" Harold nodded. "I needed to force your hand, to see if there was any of the son I raised left in you." He shook his head sadly. "I guess I have my answer." The weight of his actions of years of deception came crashing down on James. He sank to his knees, his voice breaking. "Dad, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I was trying to keep the company afloat, to live up to your legacy." Harold's expression softened slightly. "Oh, James, the company was never in danger. Those struggles, the ones you thought you were saving us from, they were tests. Challenges I set up to see how you'd handle adversity. And instead of rising to meet them, you took the easy way out. You betrayed everything I ever taught you." James looked up, tears streaming down his face. "What happens now?" Harold sighed heavily. "That depends on you, son. Are you ready to come clean, to face the consequences of your actions and make things right?" For a long moment James was silent. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I am." As the sun rose over New York City, casting long shadows through the vault, the Worthington family stood at a crossroads. The paintings were found, but at what cost? The secrets and lies that had festered for years were now exposed, raw and painful. Eliza watched the scene unfold, her heart aching for both Harold and James. This was her family now, for better or worse. Broken, flawed, but with a chance for redemption. Harold turned to her, his eyes tired but determined. "Eliza, my dear, I think it's time we told them everything. All of it." As they made their way back upstairs, the weight of unspoken truths hung heavy in the air. The story of the missing paintings had come to an end, but a new chapter in the Worthington family saga was just beginning. One that would test the bonds of blood and love, of forgiveness and redemption, in ways none of them could have imagined. So the Worthington family sat in stunned silence around the large mahogany table in Harold's study. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the faces of James, Elizabeth, and Michael as they struggled to process the revelations of the past few hours. Harold sat at the head of the table, his posture straight, his eyes clear and focused in a way they hadn't been in months. Eliza stood slightly apart, feeling like both an insider and an outsider in this family drama. She watched as Harold took a deep breath, preparing to shatter the last illusions his children clung to. "There's something else you need to know," Harold began, his voice steady. "My condition, it's not as severe as you've been led to believe." Elizabeth leaned forward, her medical training kicking in. "What do you mean, Dad?" "The tests, the diagnosis." "Were real," Harold interrupted. "I do have early-stage Alzheimer's, but I've been exaggerating my symptoms, playing up my forgetfulness, my confusion." The silence that followed was deafening. James, still reeling from the exposure of his own deceit, was the first to find his voice. "Why?" he asked, his tone a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Why would you do that?" Harold's gaze swept over his children, lingering on each face. "To test you," he said simply. "To see what you would do when you thought I was no longer capable of running the company, of managing my own affairs." Michael let out a bitter laugh. "So this was all some kind of sick game to you, watching us scramble, worry, fight amongst ourselves?" "Not a game," Harold said sharply. "A necessary measure. I needed to know if I could trust you with my legacy, with the future of this family and this company." Elizabeth shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Dad, do you have any idea what you've put us through? The stress, the fear of losing you." Harold's expression softened slightly. "I know it wasn't easy for you, but tell me, Elizabeth, when was the last time before all this that you made time in your busy schedule for your old man? When was the last time any of you did?" The accusation hung heavy in the air. Eliza watched as guilt and realization dawned on the faces of Harold's children. "So the missing paintings, the sudden interest in the company's operations, that was all part of your test?" James asked, his voice hoarse. Harold nodded. I needed to push you to see how you'd react under pressure. I never imagined you'd go as far as embezzlement, James. That was a disappointment I wasn't prepared for. James flinched at the words but said nothing. Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. And what about Eliza? Where does she fit into all this? All eyes turned to Eliza, and she felt her heart race. Harold gave her a small nod of encouragement. Eliza's role was unexpected, Harold admitted. She came into our lives by chance, but she quickly became an integral part of my plan. Her presence, her care, it allowed me to maintain the ruse while still keeping a close eye on the company and on all of you. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. So she was in on it from the beginning? Another test? No, Eliza said firmly, stepping forward. I had no idea about any of this until very recently. I was just here to help, to do my job. Everything else she trailed off, unsure how to explain the complex web of emotions and revelations she'd become entangled in. Harold cleared his throat. Eliza has been nothing but honest and caring. In fact, her presence has made me reconsider many things, including how to move forward from here. The room fell silent again as the weight of Harold's words sank in. The family dynamic had been irrevocably altered, trust shattered and rebuilt in ways none of them had anticipated. James was the first to break the silence. So what happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. To the company too, to me? Harold's expression was grave. That depends on you, James. On all of you. I won't sweep your actions under the rug, but I'm willing to give you a chance to make amends, to prove that you can be trusted with the Worthington legacy. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. I can't believe this. All this time we thought we were taking care of you, and you were what? Pulling strings behind the scenes? I was protecting my life's work, Harold said firmly, and trying to ensure that when the time comes, because it will come, make no mistake, you'll be ready to take over. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is insane. You manipulated us, lied to us, and now you expect us to just fall in line. To trust you after this? Harold's gaze hardened. I expect you to understand that sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. I expect you to look at your own actions, your own choices, and ask yourself if you've lived up to the Worthington name. The tension in the room was palpable. Eliza could see the myriad of emotions playing across the faces of Harold's children, anger, hurt, confusion, and beneath it all, a grudging respect for the cunning of the man they'd underestimated. There's one more thing, Harold said, his voice softening. He reached out and took Eliza's hand, drawing her closer. Eliza isn't just an employee, she's family, your niece to be precise. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Elizabeth gasped, James's jaw dropped, and Michael stared at Eliza with new eyes. As Harold began to explain Sarah's secret, the letter, the years of watching from afar, Eliza felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The truth was out, for better or worse. She was a Worthington, not just in blood, but now in name as well. The future was uncertain. Trust had been broken and would need to be painstakingly rebuilt. The company faced challenges both internal and external. But as Eliza looked around at this flawed, complex family she was now irrevocably part of, she felt a glimmer of hope. Harold had tested them all, pushed them to their limits. Now it was up to each of them to prove they could rise above the hurt and the betrayal to forge a new path forward, together. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the study, the Worthington family stood at a crossroads. The truth had been laid bare, the games and manipulations exposed. Now came the hard part, healing, forgiving, and rebuilding. Not just a company, but a family. The New York skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harold Worthington's penthouse. The city lights a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere within. The expansive living room, usually a showcase of opulence and taste, had been transformed. Easels stood in a semicircle, each draped with a white cloth, hiding their contents from view. The Worthington family, along with a select group of board members and close associates, milled about nervously, their murmured conversations creating a low hum of anticipation. Eliza moved among the guests, offering drinks and making small talk, all the while keeping a watchful eye on Harold. The old man stood near the windows, gazing out at the city he had helped shape, his face a mask of calm determination. Only Eliza could see the slight tremor in his hand as he gripped his cane, the only outward sign of the magnitude of what he was about to do. James lurked near the bar, nursing a scotch, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a haunted look. Elizabeth flitted from group to group, her doctor's instincts kicking in as she checked on her father from afar. Michael, surprisingly, had shown up on time, though he seemed more interested in the expensive art on the walls than in mingling with the guests. As the clock struck 8, Harold cleared his throat, the small sound somehow cutting through the chatter and bringing a hush to the room. All eyes turned to him as he made his way to the center of the semicircle of easels. "Thank you all for coming," Harold began, his voice strong and clear. "I know there have been rumors, concerns about my health and the future of Worthington Industries. Tonight I hope to put those concerns to rest and chart a new course for our family and our company." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on each of his children in turn. "But first, I want to share something with you. A project I've been working on, one that I believe will explain things far better than my words ever could." With a nod to Eliza, Harold moved to the first easel. As Eliza pulled away the cloth, a collective gasp rippled through the room. The painting was a masterful portrait of a young Harold and Sarah standing before the first Worthington hardware store. The detail was exquisite, capturing not just their likenesses but the hope and determination in their eyes. "So as some of you know, I've rekindled my passion for painting recently," Harold explained. "It's been therapeutic, helping me to remember to process. Each of these paintings tells a part of our story, the triumphs, the struggles, and yes, the secrets that have shaped the Worthington legacy." One by one, Eliza unveiled the paintings. Each canvas revealed another chapter in the Worthington saga. There was James as a young boy, proudly holding up his first business plan. Elizabeth in her medical school graduation gown, beaming with pride. Michael, surrounded by his artwork, a wistful expression on his face as he looked towards the Worthington Industries Tower in the background. But it was the final 3 paintings that drew the sharpest reactions. The first showed a split scene: on one side, James in his office, surrounded by ledgers and looking haunted. On the other, Harold watching from the shadows, his expression a mix of disappointment and resolve. James stumbled back as if physically struck, the truth of his father's knowledge of his embezzlement laid bare for all to see. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, board members exchanging concerned glances. So the next painting silenced even the whispers. It depicted a young woman, her features a clear blend of Sarah's beauty and Elizabeth's determination, holding a baby. In the background, barely visible, were Harold and Sarah, watching from afar with a mix of longing and regret. Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as she recognized herself in the young woman. The secret of her youthful pregnancy, the child given up for adoption, was no longer hers alone to bear. Harold's voice was gentle as he addressed the stunned gathering. Yes, Elizabeth had a child, many years ago. A decision was made, one that we all believed was for the best at the time. But secrets have a way of resurfacing, of shaping our lives in ways we never anticipated. He turned to Eliza, holding out his hand. She stepped forward, her heart pounding as she took her place beside him. "I'd like you all to meet Eliza Thornton, my granddaughter. Elizabeth's daughter, a Worthington by blood, and now, I hope, by choice as well." The room erupted in a cacophony of shocked exclamations and hurried whispers. Elizabeth moved towards Eliza, her steps hesitant, her eyes searching her daughter's face as if seeing her for the first time. James and Michael stood frozen, the implications of this revelation slowly sinking in. But Harold wasn't finished. He moved to the final painting, the largest of them all. As Eliza pulled away the cloth, a hush fell over the room once more. The canvas showed the Worthington family as they were now, Harold at the center, his children and Eliza arranged around him. But the painting seemed to shift before their eyes, showing not just their present selves, but echoes of their past and glimpses of possible futures. James, torn between greed and redemption. Elizabeth, the weight of her secret finally lifted. Michael, caught between his artistic dreams and his family duty. And Eliza, a bridge between past and future, her presence both a healing balm and a catalyst for change. "This," Harold said, his voice thick with emotion, "is who we are. Flawed, complicated, but still a family. Still Worthingtons. I've tested you, pushed you to your limits, because I needed to know if you were ready. Ready to face the truth, to confront our past, and to move forward together." He turned to address the board members and associates. Worthington Industries stands at a crossroads. The world is changing and we must change with it, but our core values, integrity, innovation and family, those must remain constant. Harold's gaze swept the room once more, lingering on each face. "I am not as infirm as rumors have suggested. My mind is clear, my vision for the future of this company sharper than ever. But I'm also not immortal. The time has come to prepare for the next generation of leadership." He gestured to his children and Eliza. Each of them has a role to play, strengths to bring to the table. James's financial acumen, tempered by the hard lessons of accountability. Elizabeth's compassion and strategic thinking. Michael's creative vision. And Eliza, a fresh perspective, untainted by old grudges and preconceptions. Harold's voice grew stronger, more commanding. "I propose a new structure for Worthington Industries. A council led by myself for now, but with each of them playing crucial roles. We will face the challenges ahead, not as individuals, but as a family. United." So the room was silent for a long moment as the weight of Harold's words sank in. Then slowly a smattering of applause began, growing in volume until it filled the penthouse. As the applause died down, Harold raised his hand for silence once more. "There is one final matter to address," he said, his tone grave. "James." James stepped forward, his face a mask of resigned acceptance. "I know what I did was wrong," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm prepared to face the consequences, whatever they may be." Harold nodded. "Your actions were a betrayal of everything this family and this company stand for." But he paused, his expression softening slightly. "You are my son, and I believe in second chances. You will repay every cent you took with interest. You will work under strict oversight to regain the trust you've lost. And you will dedicate a portion of your time and resources to charitable causes, to remind yourself of the responsibility that comes with privilege." James bowed his head, a mix of relief and shame washing over his features. "Thank you, Dad. I won't let you down again." As the gathering began to break into smaller groups, discussing the implications of all that had been revealed, Eliza found herself at the center of a whirlwind of introductions and questions. Elizabeth hovered nearby, clearly wanting to speak with her daughter, but unsure how to begin. Harold watched it all unfold, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had set the stage, laid bare the secrets and lies that had threatened to tear them apart. Now it was up to them, his children, his granddaughter, his legacy, to write the next chapter of the Worthington story. As the night wore on, the penthouse buzzed with a new energy. Plans were made, bridges began to be rebuilt. And at the center of it all stood the paintings, a visual testament to the power of truth, the complexity of family, and the enduring strength of the Worthington name. The night air was thick with tension as the last of the guests filed out of Harold Worthington's penthouse. The family remained, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of the evening's revelations hanging heavy in the air. Harold stood by the windows, his gaze fixed on the twinkling city lights below, while his children and newfound granddaughter hovered uncertainly in the spacious living room. James paced restlessly, his eyes darting between the paintings that had exposed his betrayal and the faces of his family members. The shame and fear that had been simmering all evening suddenly boiled over. "This isn't fair," he burst out, his voice raw with emotion. "You can't just air all our dirty laundry like this and expect everything to be okay." Harold turned slowly, his expression a mix of sadness and determination. "It wasn't about fairness, James. It was about truth. Something this family has been sorely lacking." James's face contorted with anger. "Truth? You want to talk about truth? How about the truth that you've been manipulating us all along, playing with our lives like we're pieces on a chessboard?" Elizabeth stepped forward, her doctor's instincts kicking in as she sensed the situation escalating. "James, please, let's all just calm down and—" "Calm down." James laughed bitterly. "Our lives are falling apart, Liz. My career, your secret daughter, and Michael," he gestured wildly at his younger brother, who was uncharacteristically quiet. God knows what skeletons are in his closet. Michael flinched at the accusation but remained silent, his eyes fixed on the painting that depicted his torn loyalties between art and family duty. Eliza, feeling out of place yet inexorably drawn into the family drama, tried to intervene. "Maybe we should all take a break, get some rest, and talk about this in the morning when—" "Stay out of this," James snapped, rounding on her. "You're not even supposed to be here. You're just another one of Dad's pawns, aren't you?" Harold's voice cut through the tension like a whip. "That's enough, James. Eliza's family, whether you like it or not. And she's shown more loyalty and compassion than you have in years." The words hit James like a physical blow. For a moment he stood there, chest heaving, eyes wild. Then, with a strangled cry, he lunged towards the paintings. "Family. I'll show you family." In his rage, James knocked over a lamp. It crashed to the floor, shattering and sending sparks flying onto the plush carpet. But within seconds, a small flame had ignited, feeding on the expensive fibers. The room erupted into chaos. Elizabeth screamed, Michael jumped back, and Eliza rushed to find a fire extinguisher. Harold, however, moved with surprising speed towards the paintings. "Dad, what are you doing?" Elizabeth cried, coughing as smoke began to fill the room. "We need to get out." But Harold was focused on one thing, Sarah's locket, which hung beside the painting of her and young Harold. As he reached for it, a beam weakened by the rapidly spreading fire creaked ominously overhead. Eliza saw it first. "Mr. Worthington, look out," she yelled, diving towards her grandfather. Time seemed to slow as Eliza collided with Harold, pushing him out of the way just as the beam came crashing down. They tumbled to the floor, Harold clutching the locket tightly to his chest, as flames licked at the priceless paintings around them. James, shocked out of his rage by the very real danger he'd created, sprang into action. He helped Eliza get Harold to his feet, supporting the older man as they made their way towards the exit. Elizabeth and Michael were already at the door, ushering them out as the sound of fire engines wailed in the distance. As they stumbled into the hallway, coughing and disoriented, the full impact of what had just happened began to sink in. They watched in stunned silence as firefighters rushed past them, into the inferno that had once been their family sanctuary. And hours later, as the first light of dawn broke over the city, the Worthingtons huddled together in a private waiting room at Mount Sinai Hospital. Harold had been admitted for smoke inhalation, his age making him particularly vulnerable. The others had been treated and released, bearing only minor cuts and bruises as physical reminders of the night's events. The emotional scars, however, ran much deeper. James sat apart from the others, his head in his hands. The magnitude of his actions weighed heavily upon him. He had not only endangered his family's lives, but had nearly destroyed the very legacy he had so desperately wanted to protect. Elizabeth hovered near the door, alternating between pacing and checking a phone for updates from the doctors treating her father. Her medical training warred with her emotional turmoil, leaving her feeling helpless and afraid. Michael leaned against the wall, his usual detached demeanor cracked, revealing a vulnerability none of them had seen before. The near loss of their father seemed to have shaken something loose in him, forcing him to confront the role he wanted to play in the family and the company. And Eliza, the newcomer who had risked her life to save Harold, sat quietly, her thoughts a whirlwind of concern for her grandfather and uncertainty about her place in this fractured family. When the doctor finally entered, they all held their breath, united for the first time in years by their shared fear and hope. Mr. Worthington is stable, the doctor announced, and a collective sigh of relief filled the room. The smoke inhalation was severe, but he's responding well to treatment. He's asking to see all of you. As they filed into Harold's hospital room, they were struck by how small and vulnerable he looked, hooked up to machines, an oxygen mask obscuring half his face. But his eyes were clear and alert, filled with a mixture of pain and determination. Slowly Harold reached for the locket that lay on the bedside table. With trembling hands he opened it, revealing not just the expected photo of Sarah, but a tiny folded piece of paper. As the family watched in confusion, Harold carefully unfolded the paper and held it out to James. It was a note written in Sarah's elegant hand. "My darling Harold, remember that our greatest legacy is not in wealth or achievements, but in the love we share and the family we build. Forgive often, love deeply, and always, always keep your heart open to the possibility of redemption. All my love, Sarah." As James read the note aloud, his voice breaking, a profound silence fell over the room. The words seemed to hang in the air, a gentle rebuke and a beacon of hope all at once. Harold's voice, though weak, was filled with resolve as he addressed his family. "We've been given a second chance," he said, his eyes moving from one face to another. "To be the family Sarah always believed we could be. To rebuild not just our home and our company, but our relationships. The question is, are we brave enough to take it?" As the sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the hospital room in golden light, the Worthingtons stood at another crossroads. The fire had destroyed much, but in its ashes lay the possibility of a new beginning. It was up to them to rise from those ashes, stronger and more united than ever before. The gentle beeping of medical equipment provided a steady rhythm to the tense silence in Harold Worthington's hospital room. The family had gathered around his bed, each lost in their own thoughts, the events of the past few days weighing heavily on their minds. Harold, propped up on pillows, his face pale but his eyes alert, looked at each of them in turn. James was the first to break the silence. "Dad, I don't even know where to begin," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What I did, the fire, I could have killed us all." Harold reached out a hand, grasping James's arm weakly. "But you didn't, son. We're all here, alive. That's what matters now." Elizabeth, ever the peacemaker, stepped forward. "We've all made mistakes, James." "God knows I have." Her eyes flicked to Eliza, who stood slightly apart from the group, still unsure of her place in this family drama. "The question is," Harold continued, his voice gaining strength, "what do we do now? How do we move forward from here?" Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. Maybe it's time we all laid our cards on the table. No more secrets, no more lies." He looked around the room, his gaze lingering on each family member. "I'll start. I've been selling company secrets to our competitors." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. James whirled on his brother, fury in his eyes. "You what? While I was trying to keep the company afloat, you were stabbing us in the back." "Trying to keep the company afloat," Michael shot back. "Is that what you call embezzling millions?" "Enough." Harold's voice, though weakened by smoke inhalation, still carried the authority of a man used to command. "This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about honesty, about clearing the air so we can rebuild." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "Dad's right, we need to focus on moving forward." She turned to Eliza, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and hope. I owe you an apology, Eliza. I should have told you the truth years ago. I was young, scared. I thought I was doing what was best for you. But I realize now that I was really just protecting myself." Eliza felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand," she said softly. "I won't pretend it doesn't hurt, knowing I grew up without my birth family. But I'm here now, and I want to be part of this family if you'll have me." Harold smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. "Of course we'll have you, my dear. You're a Worthington, through and through." James ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "This is all very touching, but what about the company? The press is having a field day with the fire, and once word gets out about the embezzlement and corporate espionage..." "Here we face it head-on," Harold said firmly. "We hold a press conference, lay out everything that's happened, and present our plan for moving forward. No more hiding, no more cover-ups." "But the stock will plummet," James protested. "We could lose everything." Harold shook his head. "We won't lose what matters most, our integrity, our family. The company can recover from financial setbacks. It's the trust we need to rebuild, both within the family and with the public." As the family discussed the practicalities of Harold's plan, Eliza found herself marveling at the resilience of these people she was just getting to know. Despite the betrayals, the lies, and the near tragedy of the fire, there was a strength here, a core of love and shared history that couldn't be broken. "There's something else we need to discuss," Harold said, his tone growing serious. "The future of Worthington Industries. I won't be around forever, and recent events have made it clear that we need a solid succession plan." The room fell silent, each family member acutely aware of the weight of this moment. James, Harold continued, "Your financial acumen is unquestionable, but your judgment has been compromised. You'll need to earn back the trust of the board and the employees." James nodded, accepting the rebuke with a humility that surprised them all. "Elizabeth, your compassion and level-headedness are exactly what this family needs. I want you to take a more active role in the company's charitable foundation." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "But Dad, my medical career..." "Can continue," Harold assured her, "but your perspective is valuable and the foundation could use your expertise." Turning to Michael, Harold's expression softened. "Your artistic vision has always set you apart, Michael. I think it's time we utilize that in the company. I want you to head up a new division focusing on innovative design and creative solutions." For Michael blinked, clearly taken aback by the offer. You're serious?" Harold nodded. "Deadly serious. It's time we embraced all of our family's talents." Finally, Harold turned to Eliza. "And you, my dear, you came into our lives at just the right moment. Your fresh perspective, your kindness, your ability to bridge the gap between generations. I want you to work closely with each department to help integrate our new vision across the company." Alicia felt a lump form in her throat. I don't know what to say. Thank you, I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Harold said softly. "None of you will, because this isn't just about business anymore. It's about family. It's about legacy." As the sun began to set outside the hospital window, casting a warm glow over the room, the Worthington family found themselves at the beginning of a new chapter. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, and challenges to face. Yet for the first time in years, they would face those challenges together. Harold looked at his children and granddaughter, a sense of peace settling over him. "Sarah would be proud," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She always believed in the strength of this family." As they gathered closer around Harold's bed, each reaching out to touch him, to connect with each other, the beeping of the medical equipment faded into the background. In its place was the sound of new beginnings, of a family rediscovering the bonds that had always held them together, even in the darkest of times. The Worthington legacy, once tarnished by secrets and lies, was being reforged in the crucible of honesty and forgiveness. And as they stood there, united in a way they hadn't been in years, each of them knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family. And united, stronger Worthingtons. The New York skyline sparkled in the early morning light as Harold Worthington stood at the window of his newly renovated penthouse. The scars of the fire had been erased, but the memories of that night, and the revelations that followed lingered in every corner of the room. He turned as he heard footsteps approaching, smiling as Eliza entered with a tray of tea. "Good morning, grandfather," she said, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. "Are you ready for today?" Harold nodded, his eyes twinkling with a mix of determination and anticipation. "As ready as I'll ever be, my dear. Is everyone else here?" As if on cue, the elevator chimed, and James, Elizabeth, and Michael stepped into the penthouse. The tension that had once characterized their family gatherings was noticeably absent, replaced by a cautious optimism. "Well, folks," Harold said, addressing his children and granddaughter, "today's the day. Are we all prepared?" James straightened his tie, a nervous habit he'd never quite shaken. "The press conference is set for 10 a.m. The board members have been briefed, and our PR team has prepared statements for each of us." Elizabeth added, "I've spoken with the heads of our major charitable partners. They're standing by us, Dad. They believe in the changes we're implementing." Michael, looking more engaged than he had in years, chimed in, "The design team is ready to unveil our new product line. It's going to revolutionize how people think about Worthington Industries." Harold beamed with pride. In the weeks since the hospital, since their moment of truth and reconciliation, each member of the family had thrown themselves into the task of rebuilding, not just the company, but their relationships with each other. "And you, Eliza?" Harold asked, turning to his granddaughter. "How are you feeling about all this?" Eliza took a deep breath, nervous but excited. "I've been working with each department, and the employees are cautiously optimistic. They appreciate the transparency, the new direction." Harold nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Good. Now, before we head out, there's something I want to show you all." He led them to his study, where a large covered canvas stood on an easel. With a flourish, Harold pulled away the cloth, revealing a new painting. It showed the Worthington family, Harold, his children, and Eliza standing together in front of the Worthington Industries building. But unlike his previous works, this one was filled with light, the faces of his family members open and hopeful. "This," Harold said softly, "is how I see our future. United, strong, facing whatever comes together." There was a moment of silence as they all took in the painting, the promise it held. Then, as one, they moved together, enveloping Harold in a group hug. For a moment, they weren't business tycoons or heirs to a fortune. They were simply a family, bound by love and a shared hope for the future. The press conference was a whirlwind of camera flashes and shouted questions. Harold stood at the podium, his family flanking him, as he addressed the gathered media and shareholders. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strong and clear, "today marks a new chapter for Worthington Industries. We stand before you not to make excuses, but to offer the truth and to share our vision for the future." Over the next hour, each member of the family spoke, outlining the mistakes of the past and their plans for rectification. James, his voice heavy with remorse, detailed the financial irregularities and the steps being taken to repay every cent. Michael confessed to his corporate espionage, announcing a new ethics board to oversee all company operations. Elizabeth spoke passionately about the expanded role of the Worthington Foundation in giving back to the community. When it was Eliza's turn, she stepped up to the microphone, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I may be new to the Worthington name," she said, "but I'm not new to the values this family and this company were built on. Integrity, innovation, and above all, care for our fellow human beings. These are the principles that will guide us forward." As the conference concluded, there was a palpable shift in the room. The skepticism that had greeted them at the start had given way to a cautious optimism. The Worthingtons had laid bare their flaws, their mistakes, but also their commitment to change. In the weeks and months that followed, the commitment was put to the test. James threw himself into the task of financial restitution, working tirelessly to regain the trust of investors and employees alike. Elizabeth split her time between her medical practice and the foundation, launching initiatives that brought healthcare to underserved communities. Michael's new design division, breathed fresh life into the company's product lines, merging art and functionality in ways that captured the public's imagination. And Eliza, with her unique perspective as both an insider and outsider, became the bridge between the old guard and the new vision. She moved from department to department, listening to employees at all levels, implementing changes that improved both productivity and morale. Harold watched it all with a mixture of pride and wonder. The company he had built was transforming before his eyes, becoming something greater than he had ever imagined. But more importantly, his family was healing, growing stronger with each passing day. There were challenges, of course. The road to redemption was not smooth. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, days when the weight of their past mistakes felt overwhelming. But through it all, they clung to the promise they had made to each other in that hospital room, to face whatever came together. 6 months after the press conference, the Worthingtons gathered once again in Harold's penthouse. The occasion was Elizabeth's birthday, but it felt like a celebration of so much more. As they shared a meal, laughing and talking with an ease that had once seemed impossible, Harold looked around the table with tears in his eyes. "I propose a toast," he said, raising his glass, "to second chances, to new beginnings, and to the power of family." As their glasses clinked together, the sound seemed to echo with the promise of the future, a future brighter and more beautiful than any of them had dared to hope. The Worthington legacy, once tarnished, now shone brighter than ever, a beacon of redemption and the enduring strength of love and forgiveness. 5 years had passed since the fateful night that had nearly torn the Worthington family apart. The New York skyline had changed, new towers reaching towards the heavens, but the Worthington Industries building stood proud among them, a testament to resilience and renewal. In Harold Worthington's penthouse, sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating a gathering of family and close friends. The occasion was Harold's 85th birthday, a milestone many had feared he might not reach. Yet here he stood, older certainly, moving a bit slower, but with eyes as sharp and bright as ever. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter. James, now fully redeemed in the eyes of the business world, discussed the company's latest ethical investment strategies with a group of admiring young executives. Elizabeth, her medical expertise now seamlessly blended with her role in the Worthington Foundation, shared stories of the lives they touched in communities around the globe. Michael, no longer the family's black sheep, proudly showcased sketches for a groundbreaking new product line that merged technology with his artistic vision. And Eliza, once an outsider, now moved through the crowd with the ease of someone truly at home. She had become the heart of the family in many ways, the bridge that connected generations and healed old wounds. As the party reached its peak, Harold gently tapped a spoon against his glass, calling for attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the family patriarch. "My dear family and friends," Harold began, his voice soft but clear, "I have something I'd like to share with you all." With a nod to Eliza, he gestured towards a large easel that had been set up near the windows, covered with a velvet cloth. Eliza stepped forward and, with a flourish, unveiled the canvas beneath. A collective gasp filled the room. The painting was a masterpiece, perhaps Harold's finest work. It depicted the Worthington family, not just as they were now, but as they had been throughout the years. In the foreground stood Harold and Sarah, as young newlyweds, their eyes filled with hope and determination. Behind them, scenes from the family's history unfolded, the triumphs and the struggles, the moments of joy and of pain. But it was the center of the painting that drew every eye. There, painted with exquisite detail and profound love, were Harold's children and Eliza, surrounded by a new generation of Worthingtons, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, some already born, others yet to come. Their faces shone with a light that seemed to radiate from the canvas itself, a promise of a future bright with possibility. "This," Harold said, his voice thick with emotion, "is my final painting, the story of our family, past, present, and future." Elizabeth stepped forward, tears in her eyes as she recognized her younger self holding baby Eliza. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, "it's beautiful." James, his arm around his own son, nodded in agreement. "You've captured it all, every moment that made us who we are." Michael, usually so composed, wiped a tear from his cheek. "It's not just a painting, is it? It's our legacy." Eliza, standing close to Harold, squeezed his hand gently. "It's perfect, grandfather. It's us." Harold looked around at his family, his heart full to bursting. The journey had been long and often painful, but as he gazed at the faces of those he loved most in the world, he knew every step had been worth it. "Family," he said softly, raising his glass once more, "is the greatest masterpiece of all." As the room erupted in applause and the family gathered close, enveloping Harold in a warm embrace, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges lay ahead, the Worthington legacy was secure. Not in wealth or status, but in the love and unity of a family that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger than ever. In that moment, as Harold Worthington looked at his final painting and the living legacy it represented, he knew that he would be remembered not just as a successful businessman, but as the architect of a family built on love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of kinship. In the tapestry of life, we often focus on the golden threads of success, wealth, and achievement. But the Millionaire's fading memories reminds us that the true richness of our existence lies in the intricate patterns of our relationships, the vibrant hues of our shared experiences, and the resilient fibers of family bonds. Like Harold Worthington, we may build empires of steel and glass, accumulate fortunes that sparkle like stars, but in the twilight of our lives, it's not the weight of our wallets that comforts us, it's the warmth of a loving hand, the echo of shared laughter, the bittersweet ache of reconciled heartaches. This story whispers a profound truth. Our most valuable legacy is not etched in corporate ledgers or emblazoned on buildings. It's written in the hearts of those we love, painted in the memories we create, and lived in the lives we touch. In our pursuit of success, we may stumble. Like James, we might betray our values. Like Elizabeth, we may hide from our past. Like Michael, we might lose sight of our true selves. But this narrative teaches us that it's never too late for redemption, never too late to heal old wounds, never too late to paint a new masterpiece of our lives. Remember, every family is a puzzle of imperfect pieces. It's in the act of fitting these pieces together with patience, forgiveness, and love that we create a picture more beautiful than we ever imagined. As you reflect on your own story, ask yourself, what paintings hang in the gallery of your mind? Are they filled with regret and missed opportunities, or do they capture moments of joy, love, and growth? Like Eliza, are you brave enough to step into the role you were meant to play in your family's story? Can you, like Harold, use your experiences, even the painful ones, to create something beautiful that bridges past and future generations? In the end, we are all artists of our own lives, each day a blank canvas awaiting our touch. Will you paint with bold strokes of courage, blend the colors of compassion and understanding, or add intricate details of small, loving gestures? Remember, in the grand exhibition of life, the most priceless masterpieces are not locked away in vaults or displayed in museums. They're hanging on the walls of homes where love resides, forgiveness reigns, and family means everything. Your legacy, your true wealth, is not measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives you've touched, the love you've shared, and the memories you've created. In the fading light of life, these are the treasures that will shine the brightest. So pick up your brush. It's never too late to start your masterpiece. Dear valued listeners, as we close the final chapter of the Millionaire's fading memories, we want to express our heartfelt gratitude for joining us on this emotional journey. Your presence and engagement breathe life into these stories, making each word resonate with meaning. We're deeply curious about how this tale has touched you. Has it stirred memories of your own family dynamics? Perhaps it sparked reflections on the nature of wealth and legacy, or maybe it simply entertained you with its twists and turns. Whatever your thoughts, we'd be honored if you'd share them with us. Your feedback is the canvas upon which we paint our future narratives. It's the compass that guides us to create stories that not only entertain but also touch the soul. If you found yourself moved by the Worthington family's journey, we invite you to leave a comment with the number 1. It's a simple gesture that speaks volumes, telling us that stories like these resonate with you. For those of you left wanting more, wondering about the next chapter in the Worthingtons' lives, a comment with the number 2 would signal your interest in a potential sequel. Your enthusiasm is the spark that ignites our creative fire. And if there were aspects of the story that didn't quite hit the mark for you, we welcome your honest thoughts. Your constructive criticism is invaluable in helping us refine our craft and deliver even more compelling narratives in the future. Lastly, if our stories have become a part of your routine, bringing a touch of drama, emotion, or reflection to your day, we humbly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Your subscription is more than just a click, it's a show of support for our team, a vote of confidence in our storytelling, and an encouragement for us to keep weaving these tales that connect us all. Remember, every great story is a collaboration between the storyteller and the listener. You, dear audience, are not just passive recipients, but active co-creators in this narrative journey. Thank you for lending us your ears, your hearts, and your imaginations. Here's to many more stories that remind us of the beauty, complexity, and enduring power of the human spirit. With deepest appreciation, Inspiring True Stories team.